guys, I hope you're all having a lovely day. Okay, so I wanted to make myself a pair of high-waist panties to match my new Zoe bra. And I thought instead of actually drafting a whole new pattern, I'm just going to add some seam lines to a pattern that I already have. So I thought this would be the perfect time to do this tutorial, which I've been meaning to do for a while, of how to add your own style lines to a sort of basic panty pattern. This kind of works for any pattern really, a bra pattern or a sort of hipster style panty pattern, or sort of just a basic pattern with your basic sort of shape. So I've got my Maxine high waist panty pattern here. This is a free pattern just for this style. There is a sort of paid version which comes with loads of suspender belt options, so if you have bought that, this is just the style one, just the basic high waist panty pattern. If you haven't got this pattern already, head over to my website where you can download just this style for free, so check that out. Okay, so I have just done a few little sketches very quickly and very roughly for the kind of thing that I want. I've done a few different ones and I'm going for this one. So it does help if you sort of have in mind what you want to make before you start drawing all over your pattern. So this is what we're going for here. It's just bringing in some details from the bra with this sort of waistband here. So that is what I'm going to be making. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm not going to be changing any part of the crotch, so that can go to one side. Nothing will need to be changed. You can just follow the instructions on the pattern piece for that one. And the back, you can choose whether you want to change the back or just the front. It's up to you and what sort of lines you're adding. So one very popular style line that you'll see quite a bit on high waist panties is just to sort of draw a diagonal line in somewhere around here. So you can play around with that if you want just a straight line. I'm going to draw it in a curved seam because I think that looks quite cute. So I'm going to use the curved edge of my pattern master. Now whatever we do automatically will be mirrored because this is the centre front and you place it on the fold. So if we cut sections out here, we'll have to sort of cut two out rather than obviously them being on the fold because we've cut it away. But the main sort of front part, because I'm going to draw a seam in here, will still be put on the fold and then reflected. We'll get to that bit in a minute. So I'm just going to use the curved section of my pattern master. I think it's a really nice sort of gradual curve, so I'm just going to use that roughly in the lines where I've sort of positioned it to be, and there we are. I think that looks quite cute. I'm now going to draw in this and it creates like the band effect. Okay, so I have just quickly drawn in my seam allowances on both the front and back pattern pieces. That's a 5mm seam allowance on this pattern, but just be careful which pattern you are using. It may be bigger, smaller. I doubt it will be smaller, but just in case it is, check your pattern instructions and then maybe draw them in. It will just help you line anything up if you're adding in a sort of horizontal seam. So I'm going back to my front pattern piece. So I'm going to draw it in. I think I'm feeling kind of maybe a 4 or 5 centimetre at the side. I'm going to go for 5 centimetres here, and then I'm just going to have it going somewhere there. Again, I'm going to draw that in. But yeah, just eyeball it. Do whatever you think looks right, because with the panty pattern, you know, it's not going to change too much. It's quite a front and back, you know, it's quite easy to see what it's going to look like on the final thing. I think about there might look cute. I don't want it to be too low down. Okay, I'm feeling it right about there. Oh yes, okay, I'm happy with that. You can see I've kind of split this into 3 sections. So I've got a seam here and I'm going to have a seam here. So I'm going to have a different fabric here and here is going to be the same fabric. So I think that'll look quite cute. So now what I'm going to do is do a similar sort of thing on the back. Kind of take my measurements so it looks roughly the same. So there we are, these are my style lines, and I've done the same on the front and the back. If you don't want to bother with the back, you don't have to. Really depends what you're making, what you're trying to match it to, but I want it kind of to tie in the front and the back. So the next thing I'm going to do now is just cut these pieces out. Okay, so I've cut everything out and I've just relabeled it before I get confused. So I now have a front side upper and a front side lower. You can just name them whatever you want, whatever you will remember. So because this has been sort of cut on the fold, that's automatically reversed, but we now need 2 of these, 1 reversed, so for the other side. So I've just relabeled those and written on them so I don't forget. Okay, so I've cut out all these pattern pieces. These are the new pattern pieces, so this is the back, but this is sort of the important bit to make sure that it goes back together and creates the same overall shape, because then you can just carry on following your pattern instructions. But what we need to do is to add in our seam allowances. So basically you need to add in a seam allowance anywhere where you've created your own seam. So I don't need to bother with here or here because this was the edge of the pattern already, but what I do need to add in is a seam allowance all the way down here, a seam allowance here and here and here and here. So the amount of seam allowance you want to add onto your pattern really depends on how you're planning on finishing your seams. So I'm going to be overlocking the side seam, so I'll be overlocking these 2 seams as well. So I'm just going to add in a 5mm seam allowance. So this is really important, you just add seam allowances to the sort of new seams that you've created. Leave any seams, original seams from the pattern, just leave those alone and just sort of add in on the new seams you've created. If you are maybe using a zigzag stitch and then cutting back your seam allowances to the stitches, you may want to add in a centimetre. It's really up to you. I'm literally just going to stick it on just along the edge and then grab some tape and just stick this edge down. All the way along. I'm going to move these pattern pieces out of the way for the moment. I'm going to take my pattern master, but you can sort of use a rule or whatever you've got, and I'm going to add in a 5mm seam allowance all the way down this seam. So you can see I've just added a 5mm seam allowance down the edge of this seam, then I'm going to cut this out. So you are, that's the first piece done, and I'm just going to repeat this method with all my other pattern pieces on the seams that I've created. So we are, I've laid all my pattern pieces out just so I can make sure that I've put all my seam allowances in the right place, and I can see that I have. It's worth just doing that just to double check everything so we don't get any surprises later on. And you can see if you put your seam allowances almost like where it will be when it's sewn, that the overall pattern piece shape hasn't changed. We aren't changing the overall silhouette, we are just adding in some style lines if you want to use different fabrics and stuff and really make the most of it. So I can make the most of my style lines here by adding in some different fabrics. So I'm going to use the stripy fabric for the front side upper and back side upper, that's what I've called them, and then some floral fabric for the rest of it. So this is going to tie really well in with the Zobra that I've just made. So here goes, I'm cutting all these pattern pieces out. So I've cut out all my fabrics. I've got my floral bits here and here, and then my black and white striped fabric on the front and the back, like this. So how you assemble your pattern pieces now will really depend on the style lines that you put in, but essentially you want to get back to the original pattern shape. So I'm basically going to just sew all these pieces together, and then I can carry on with my regular pattern instructions for this pattern. So to start off with, I'm going to sew the upper and lower side pieces, because then it's really easy to just sew them into this seam along here. I'm going to do that on the front and the back. There we are. I've pressed all the seams flat. So this overall pattern piece is still the same shape. This is the front. Now I'm just going to sew together all the back pattern pieces. There you are, that's the back and that's the front. And because we haven't changed the overall actual shape of the pattern piece, you can now just go ahead and follow the rest of your pattern instructions, whatever pattern you are following, and you have a beautiful pair of customised panties.